you look at it from a supply chain perspective, in particular logistics perspective, I mean, cost and service tend to be the most common metric categories, if you will, that I see a lot of companies, focus on. I mean, you touched upon a few other there in your response there, but I mean, are there, other metric categories important? Is there a metric, you just talked about employees, measuring the employee piece as being something companies overlook sometimes. Are there other kind of areas that companies tend to overlook sometime or de-emphasize, when in reality, they should try to, again, find that balance?
Yeah, as you mentioned, cost and service are obviously the two that a lot of organizations kind of look at, whether it's cost per unit, cost per shipment, service is on time delivery, perfect order index, that kind of thing. Productivity is an internal process that a lot of organizations measure as well. And there should be a correlation between productivity and cost, right? So what I try to challenge a lot of organizations to do when I go in and try to help from an improvement perspective is take your volume, take your shipped volume or your received volume, and take the number of hours you're working. And I usually try to tell people to do the clocking report. And simply do a plot with hours worked on the y-axis and volume on the x-axis. And what you should see is, as volume goes up, the number of worked hours go up, right? And that kind of gives you an indication of the productivity of the organization. You've got to establish that correlation between productivity and cost. Cost is more of what I would call a lagging indicator. At the end of the day, at the end of the month, this is what it cost us to provide that good or service to the customer. Productivity is much more of a leading indicator. So if you can affect productivity, then you can affect cost in a positive way. So you've got cost, you've got productivity, you've obviously got service. If you can't do it right the first time, then your costs are going to go up and your productivity is going to suffer. So you have to measure some level of quality within the organization, whether it be parts per million defective, whether it be order pick accuracy, but just some level of, is my processes achieving the desired result the first time? Are my customers happy? Are they receiving the product in the right quantity at the right time with no issues? So you've got cost, productivity, you've got service, you've got quality, you've got safety, right? So safety is another one that most organizations would measure. If we're not safe and we're not providing a safe work environment for our employees, then obviously it's going to affect each one of those metrics we just talked about. So safety, again, is extremely important. The last one that I think a lot of organizations leave out is morale. And then a lot of organizations struggle with trying to measure the morale of their workforce. It can be measured in a million different ways, whether you talk about engagement scores, such as the scores that Gallup offers. A very simple and basic measure that organizations can start with is just turnover. Do I have a lot of employee turnover, or do I have low employee turnover? Because in turnover is kind of an indication of how well you're developing and engaging your workforce to actually help you achieve all those other measures that we talked about. So my suggestion, my recommendation is to look at, number one, a balanced scorecard approach that talks about those 4 areas that we mentioned before: financial perspective, internal process perspective, customer perspective, and employee. And then look at defining measures in each one of those areas that we just talked about.